being here today. This is, as you know, I've spoken, I believe, three prior times on webinars for Austin Community College, my favorite place that I ever had an academic home. I miss it so much. And so it's really a lot of fun to be back and working with my former colleague, Dr. Khosrowpour, and my new colleague, Leila Taragi. It's just wonderful to be here. This is, of course, not an especially happy clappy topic, abuse, but it's a necessary topic because I want all of you to have great, healthy love in your lives. And you can only say yes if you know how to say no. It's the only way you can say yes is knowing how to say no. So what I want to cover today is how do you know that a no is in the offing? And not just for you, most of you either are or will be parents someday. You may need to help your children with this topic. You may need to help your friends with this topic. So the information is good for you and hopefully people that you love. So I really think about this in terms of developing your wisdom when it comes to abuse and developing your plan for safety and helping other people with their plan for safety. So this is kind of an abuse 101 topic. And I think it fits perfectly in a seminar or webinar series for peace and relationships because you don't have peace if you have abuse. But one of the first questions I'd like to ask all of you is what you think abuse is. Because frequently when I ask people, they think it's merely being unkind or disrespectful. Those of you who have attended my former webinars, or if you've read my books or listened to any of my podcasts or really interacted with me in any way, you'll know that the following sentence gets said in nearly everything I do. If you can find and be someone kind and respectful, your relationships are likely to go well. And if you can't, they definitely won't. So bottom line, kind, respectful behavior consistently as a way of being is just core to having a happy relationship. And I can tell you for sure that longitudinal studies like that, by those by the Gottmans for 35 years and more now have shown that if you can't be kind and respectful to your partner and they can't be kind and respectful to you on a routine basis, even when things aren't going their way, even when they've had a frustrating day, even when they're upset with you, if you can't do that and be that, it's not going to work out. That's a different standard than abuse, isn't it? So what I'm trying to say is, first of all, your standard should not be, is this abusive enough to leave? It should be, is this good enough to stay? That's really where I want to start out with this. Okay, so I've got a couple answers here. Abuse comes in many forms. Being ignored is one way. Excellent. It can happen that way. Emotional, physical, financial, where there is a pull on another to gain the abuser's favor. Another person says constant behavior that questions a person's ethical standards. So these are effective definitions. I want to share a definition that scientists use, though, because my work is based on relationship science. And that definition is, oh, now my arrows don't want to work. Whoa, and now they want to work too well. Okay, abuse is violence with a purpose. It's violence that is intended to control another person through fear and intimidation. The purpose of the violence, and Dr. Khosrowpour is absolutely right, it's not only physical violence. It could be, and just verbal abuse is not only abuse, but people who've been abused routinely report that the verbal abuse was the worst part of it. So if somebody ever says, oh, it's just verbal abuse on its own is considered to be the absolute worst part of abuse. We should give it full legitimacy. But that violence, whether it's verbal or otherwise, it has a purpose. And that purpose is through sustained violence to control you through fear and intimidation. Where does it come from? Well, Dr. Khosrowpour gave us one idea, and it's true. I didn't include it in the presentation, but I should have. So I thank Dr. Khosrowpour for having brought this up. There is sometimes a circumstantial component to abuse, which is people who are in really tight financial circumstances, they're chronically financially stressed, people who are chronically emotionally stressed, they tend to be more likely to be both abusers and abused. But there are answers beyond that for where abuse comes from. And I'm going to be quoting or citing the work of Dr. David Buss, Dr. Martin Daly, and Dr. Margot Wilson, in addition to Gavin de Becker, Lindy Bancroft, Neil Jacobson, and John Gottman. And all these people have PhDs except for de Becker and Bancroft. All of them are male except for Margot Wilson. And there are reasons for that, as we'll be discussing. So Dr. Buss wrote a book, and by the way, he's in Austin. I know most of you are as well. He's a full professor at UT Austin. And his work is in evolutionary psychology. He's actually the author of the most famous and the initial textbook on the topic. And he's written a book called The Dangerous Passion. Oh, somebody says I took his intro to evolutionary psych. I bet you loved it too. Eye-opening. Another person says verbal and emotional abuse are the worst for me. I'm sorry you've gone through that. And yes, most people would concur with that. Yeah, and depressing. Yeah, Dr. Buss's class can be depressing. We find out things about our mating psychology maybe we would just have soon not wanted to know. I know that's my experience with it as well. He's a great guy. So he wrote a book called The Dangerous Passion, Why Jealousy is as Necessary as Love and Sex. And that title really caught me because I wouldn't have thought of jealousy as necessary, but it turns out it's evolution's smoke alarm. There are chronically jealous people, and I don't want you to date or marry chronically jealous people, but there are also many people who really don't get jealous unless there's a reason, and the reason is there's smoke, and where there's smoke, there might be fire. Unfortunately, there's a downside to jealousy. When a person is pathologically jealous, or when they are jealous too easily, or when they are jealous and they feel like they have to do something about it, unfortunately, that is when we get the largest source of violent death and injury to women from ages 15 to 55, absolutely everywhere in the world. I mean, from hunter-gatherer societies to the United States and on every continent, every culture that's ever been studied, male jealousy of a female partner is the number one reason that women are killed everywhere in the world. And it is the number one reason that they are injured. So jealousy has a really dark side. And, we're going to talk about pre-abuse indicators, but pathological jealousy or intense jealousy is one of them. Also, abuse comes from the lions among us. I don't know how many of you know very much about lions. My former husband raised lions, and so I came to know quite a lot about them. And I really like lions quite a lot. They're beautiful. They have this amazing social hierarchy. But there's some things that, as a human being, I'm not real crazy about. And one of them is that the first thing a male lion does when he takes over a pride, that is, he kicks out the existing lion or lions, because sometimes a male and his brothers will control a pride of females. He and his brothers may kick out these other lions. And when he does that, the first thing he does is actually not to mate with the females. That's the second thing he does. Anybody know the first thing?
They kill all the offspring.
They try to run away the offspring that can survive, but those that are too young to survive, they execute them.
Yeah.
And does anybody know why they do it?
Lineage, I'm guessing.
Well, they could still ostensibly have a lineage and let these youngsters survive. The problem is that lionesses won't go into estrus until the cubs are weaned.
Yeah.
And it can take a long time to wean the cubs. And by the time the cubs are weaned, if Papa Lion stays around and waits for that event, and the female finally becomes fertile, he may actually be kicked out by then. Look, in our psychology, just like lions, our mating psychology, and abuse has a lot to do with mating psychology. Our mating psychology comes from an ancient past. And in that ancient past, there may have been kind, gentle lions who waited for the females to come into estrus for months or even years. And then they had sex with them and they had their own offspring. But the fact is, they didn't have as many offspring as the males, who were basically ruthless. And so today, anything that causes more offspring to be conceived and actually raised to adulthood, where those offspring have their own offspring, that's an adaptation, which doesn't mean it's morally good. It means it's effective at spreading genes and spreading that particular lion's genes. If any of you have ever heard that evolution is about spreading genes, it's not about spreading everybody's genes. The mating mind is extremely self-focused. It's very selfish, and it wants to spread your own. So one place that abuse comes from is the lions among us. What I mean by this, parents in the room, is that humans have lions too. Daly and Wilson in Canada predicted that there would be certain factors that would predict violence against children and violent death that children experience and sexual abuse that children experience. Anyone want to guess who the most likely person? Somebody says your PowerPoint is not in presentation mode, which is okay. I just wanted to give you a heads up. Yes, I wasn't able to fix that. It went out of presentation mode and I wasn't able to fix it again. So I just decided to go with this, if that's okay with everybody. I'm not a technological wonder, I'll tell you that for sure. Anyway, Daly and Wilson made a prediction about the number one factor that would predict violence, sexual abuse, and death in children, especially very young children. One person says, is it parents? And the answer is not just no, hell no, it's not parents. It's not parents. And by the way, if you feel bad for making a guess that isn't right, I taught psychology for 20 years. Trauma, contempt, none of that was a big predictor. Not a big predictor in extreme violence against children. It is true that people who have been traumatized in their own childhood are more likely to traumatize their children than people who weren't traumatized. Still, we've got more than 2/3 of people who are traumatized in their early lives who never traumatized their own kids. Atmosphere, nope, that's not a predictor either. So don't feel bad. I asked this question for about 20 years in classes. Nobody ever got it. Here's the answer. The wrong stepdad. Humans have lions too. There are lions among us. There are men who come into women's lives, women especially who have young children, and they kill them. Now, of course, females in humans come into estrus. We have periods every approximately 28 days, and our fertility is not particularly affected, especially in societies where maybe there's not as long a breastfeeding or that kind of thing. Lions aren't thinking, by the way, consciously, oh, she won't go into estrus until I kill her cub, so I have to kill her cub. Mating psychology is unconscious and it doesn't know why it wants what it wants. So somebody says, can you repeat that? I'm not sure I heard you. What I'm saying is that the presence of any male in the household who is not genetically related to the children is the number one cause of violent death, sexual abuse, and extreme physical abuse and trauma among young children. Which means that when I'm talking to you about abuse, I'm not just talking about abuse to a parent, I'm also talking about abuse to the children. And I know it's really popular right now to say that there's no such thing as gender and that men and women abuse equally. And I want to tell you, science does not come down on the side of that being true. So I'm going to go along with the science, and you're welcome to your own views, but I'm going to be going with what the science says, which is jealousy has a very dark side. Women and men can be equivalently jealous, but men tend to be the ones who hurt, emotionally hurt, physically hurt, and kill their partners over it. And they tend to be the ones who emotionally, physically, especially physically, harm and kill children. Now, every society has the story of the lustful stepfather and the wicked stepmother. I mean, Cinderella, anyone, we all know that story. So I'm not saying that having an unrelated female in the home is great for kids either. Most people have an open preference for their own kids. But what I'm talking about is when it crosses the line into actual abuse, violence with a purpose to control through fear and intimidation. All right, so we're going to talk about the work of Gavin DeBecker and Lundy Bancroft here today as well. Gavin DeBecker is a personal protection expert, and Lundy Bancroft is an expert in abuse and specifically in abusers. He's written an amazing book called Inside the Minds of, Why Does He Do That? Inside the Minds of Angry and Controlling Men. Gavin DeBecker has written a book called The Gift of Fear, and we're going to talk some about their work today. Basically, we'll talk about what abusers are like and how you can avoid them. And then finally, we'll talk about how do you get away from an abuser and what are the kinds of abusers. And that relies on the only 5-year longitudinal study of abuse that I know of so far, the one by Neil Jacobson, who has since died, and Dr. John Gottman, who's better known for his work on happy marriages. We'll talk about the path forward. Does the science also account for men committing suicide because of abuse of all kinds, including abusive women? Not to my knowledge. Okay. Avoiding abuse, who can you trust? We're going to talk about 4 different sources that you can trust. The first is your intuition, which is knowing without direct proof. Intuition, you might be surprised to find, is scientifically validated. It resides in the right hemisphere of your brain. It has evolutionary roots. We know, for example, that our children are protected psychologically from ancient dangers such as heights, being left alone, and being predated upon by strangers. Because right at about 8 months, independent of experience, that is, no matter how rarely a child has fallen, no matter how seldom a child has been with strangers, and no matter how seldom a child has been left alone in the dark, children fear those things. They fear heights, they fear strangers, they fear the dark. So we know that we have biological mechanisms that help our children to survive, but they only help our children to survive things that have had long enough to get a genetic foothold in the population, such as strangers, the dark, and heights. They haven't helped very much yet with things like cars, electrical outlets, and guns. You know, we have toddlers who die every year from those events. What are the odds that evolution has protected our children and it did nothing for us? Well, I think those odds are very low, and I think science is supporting that women, especially, to some degree men, but especially women, are likely to have a knowing without direct proof when they are in the presence of someone dangerous, if they're able to listen to it. And how you listen to it is through your emotions. A word to those of you who've been abused, whether you're male or female. If you were taught to suppress um, rather than pay attention to your emotions. If you were, for example, hit for crying when you were little, or you were abused for having emotions when you were growing up, you may not trust your emotions, but they are there, and they are there to help you. And I've written a book that it's ostensibly for single parents and those dating them, but really it's for everyone. If abuse has been an issue in your life, I would like you to get a copy of this book, or if you worry about it being an issue and you have children, Love Factually for single parents and those dating them. It's my second book. My first book, which is for absolutely everybody, is Love Factually, 10 Proven Steps from I Wish to I Do. But this doesn't really touch on abuse very much. Head to my website, and I'll show you a link. Yeah, I see that you lost my sound. I've got an unstable connection. Sorry about that. Nothing much I can do. I hope that doesn't happen very often. So it communicates via your emotions. If you feel, where can I find your book, Love Factually for single parents? So I'm going to have a slide at the very end that shows where to find all these references to other books and my books and all of that. But the short answer is lovefactually.co. It gives you links to everything. Okay, why do people ignore their intuition? We all have intuition. Why do we ignore it? In my experience, we ignore our intuition for a number of reasons. One of them is the push to fairness. Animals don't ignore their intuition. If they feel emotionally that they're afraid, they fight, flee, or freeze. But people usually keep collecting data. And that's sometimes because they've been abused and told that their intuition is wrong. Sometimes it's because they've been told they're too emotional and that intuition is woo-woo and that you shouldn't pay any attention to it. They don't understand it's scientifically validated. Sometimes it's because they feel like they have to be fair. A lot of women especially are groomed, either just culturally or outright in their families, to be accommodating, to be pleasant, to be fair, to give everybody a chance, and to put everybody else's well-being above their own. And they ignore their intuition. And then there's another reason. And this reason I see a lot in my client practice. I see clients all over the world. I'm not a therapist, but I do relationship coaching. And I frequently find that when people are ignoring their intuition, women as well as men, who are ignoring that little voice that is saying, and that pit in their gut that is saying, this is not the right one for you, they're ignoring it because they're lonely. And I think this is a big risk during pandemic. Look, almost all of us who are single raising hand here, are touch deprived, right? There's a C1 afferents are the nerve endings right along here in your back, along your back and your sides, and you get those nerve endings. They're involved with all primates in grooming, but also in hugging, in touch that bonds. And right now, I got to tell you, every C1 afferent I have is very, very lonely. And so it can be very tempting when we are lonely to ignore our intuition and just go with whoever's there right then. Huh, me too. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Okay. So what I want to tell you is you have to listen to your intuition. You can listen to it now or you can be sorry later. But when your intuition tells you that someone is wrong for you should believe it the first time. You should Maya Angelou the heck out of that. You know, Maya Angelou, America's famous African American poet, once said, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. Somebody says, yes, and most advice, tips, etc., about dealing with the pandemic and quarantine is about living with children. Yeah, it is. And that's why I want to take some of the focus off of children and really onto you as adults who never stop needing touch. You know, we talk a lot about children's attachment needs, their needs to be held, their needs to have their needs, emotional needs met, their need for bonding. And that never stops, actually. Attachment science, and you know this because I've done a webinar on it for ACC, attachment never stops mattering. It is a cradle to grave phenomenon, and we all need touch. It's a need. It's not something that we merely want. So I get it. What I want to say is I have compassion if you've ignored your intuition in the past, but I want to discourage you from ignoring it going forward because intuition is literally there to save you. It's there to help you have a happier emotional life, but its primary job really is to save your life. And so people who've been raised to be accommodating and to think, oh, I need to trust somebody until they show otherwise. No, you need to trust people based on their behavior, which you can't assess instantaneously. Do not give trust. It's not given based on faith. It is gradually escalated based on evidence. I would like you to have a new attitude about trust. That doesn't mean you go into dates with a chip on your shoulder expecting to be disappointed. It means you expect the best, but you understand that detecting whether you're in the presence of the best and the acceptable takes time. Okay, who else can you trust? You can trust your intuition. You should also trust their ex. Okay. I want you, if you have little kids, I want you to say to your new partner, I'm going to need to talk to your ex. If you feel like you can't say that and have this person be okay with it, and you don't need to say it on the first date, but if it looks like things are trending exclusive, you need to say it then because this person is going to spend time around your children. People with nothing to hide will hide nothing. If your new partner is trustworthy, they will give you access to their life, including their ex. Why do I say this? Because the ex will usually tell you the truth. Now, I'm not saying that the ex is the only source, but intuition plus the ex, I think you'll find that you often find agreement there. There's a question you can ask, though, even before you ask the question about the ex. You can ask a question that is frequently very revealing, and you can do it on early dates. And that question is, and I have all my clients ask the question, if your ex were here with us right now, what would they say was the reason for your breakup? And here's the thing, you're not just listening for the answer, you're listening for the tone of voice and you're listening for the emotional valence. Here are two answers that are the same. They're the same, but they're vastly different at the same time. I'm coming up with an answer right now. Okay. Well, we had a lot of difficulty. We had very different ideas on spending. I was really more of a saver. She was really more of a spender. And over time, this got to be a really big issue for us. Anybody see any problem with that answer? I've got a couple questions. How can you tell if your intuition is not misguided by bias and fear of intimacy? what you can do is learn a lot about intimacy, first of all. And I specifically recommend, if you have a fear of intimacy, I specifically recommend, got a bunch of books over here, Attached by Amir Levine and Rachel Heller. I want you to get that book. Again, I do have a list of references at my website, and you'll have access to those at the end today. Okay. Let's see. I agree 100%. I decided not to date anymore. Last boyfriend was abusive and controlling. It happened 3 years ago. Happy with my new kitty. I'm a new cat mom. Keeps me busy. I love your seminars. Thank you very much. I have had some bad experiences myself, but I'm never giving up on love, because I think, for me at least, it's a real need and not just something that I want. I don't mean it's a need like I can't get by without it, but I do mean my life is much better with it. So I'm going to hang in there and keep looking. And that's what I teach people to do. But of course, your mileage may vary, and people are always welcome to check out for a while or permanently if they want. So going back to the answer that this person gave, there was nothing wrong with that answer at all. He just said they had a difference, and that eventually that difference wore on them, and that they couldn't get along over that difference, and that was one reason that their relationship dissolved. That's a perfectly fine answer. Yeah, what was the answer? Okay, so sorry. I'm saying that when you're trusting their ex, that there's a question you can ask. And that question is, if your ex were here right now, what would they say is the reason for your breakup? And if a guy says, or if a person says something like, in this case, it's a guy, he says, well, she was really more of a spender and I was more of a saver. And over time, that became a major source of discord. We couldn't find our way back. We went to therapy, nothing worked for us, and our communication broke down. And, I wish it had been different, but it wasn't. Okay, there may be things that they could have done to save that relationship, but the answer that this person just gave, there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing unkind or disrespectful. They're not saying the other person's a terrible person. Here's the same answer in a format that I want you to be really not okay with. She was a spendthrift and a bitch, and I couldn't get rid of her fast enough, and I don't give a crap what she would say. Do you hear the difference? I'm sure you do. So you're listening for how the person talks about their ex, not just whatever the issue was. Also, when you talk to their ex, you should ask their ex for other people you can talk to if you have any intuition that something is wrong. When I said who you can trust and I started with intuition, if you have a fear that there is something untrustworthy about this person, you need to either, if your gut says a firm no, just go with it. But if it says collect more data, go with that. Secondary sources in the personal protection business are called developed sources. I'm going to give you an example from my own dating life. There was someone who we had a lot of Facebook friends in common, and I had a gut knowing that this person was not safe. I just felt that there was something off. And so normally I would probably just never see this person, but we'd already made a plan to at least meet for a socially distanced walk. This was recent during pandemic. And I went to one of these developed sources, a secondary source, somebody known to both of us. And I asked, is there a reason that I shouldn't go out with so-and-so? And this person basically said, yes, he abused a friend of mine, and gave me details. I would never have known that from talking to this individual. I might not have known it from talking to an ex. Never got that far in talking about that, but it might have saved me months, and it certainly saved me pain. And I just don't want, there's no need for you to go through that. If you have kids, you also need to trust your kids. If your kids have a sense that this person is dangerous, you need to be done with it. If somebody says, is it really wise to trust their ex, whether it was a bad or a good relationship? Because both parties will have their own bias about what happened. Yes, I want you to trust their ex. And here's why. Women almost never lie about having been abused. So if this ex, you know, if this ex says something like, he's such a bastard, I hate his guts, and I don't see why you would even be talking to him, that person is showing unkindness and disrespect, and you can disregard that feedback. But if this person says, if this person shows basic good ability to communicate and says, and this happened to me, by the way, years and years ago, there was someone who said, I was so relieved when you stopped dating my ex. He was jailed for beating me, and I never knew whether I should tell you or not. That person is telling the truth. Would you suggest talking to an ex only if you're questioning, or would you suggest always talking to the ex for information about the person? Really, if you have young children, it's 100% always. You just need to do it. And when I had a young child and I was a single parent, that's what I did too. I said, I'm going to need to talk to your ex. And by the way, anybody who can't handle it, bye-bye. Let me tell you, somebody who's dating a single parent who doesn't get it, that you need more information, they don't get it. They don't get it well enough. Just be done with them. If you don't have young children, this would be, I would suggest finding secondary sources if there's anything in your emotions that say this person might not be safe. Okay, a third source of who you can trust. You can trust the web. You're welcome. You can trust the web. If you've got this person's name, address, date of birth, and in fact, usually just their name, you can find out so much about them. So I recently made a profile. I went on the interwebs to find a partner. I met a bunch of really nice people, nice, a good enough fit that we had a phone call. I met 4 people in person, and I've gone out with 1 person twice now. And um, I did my homework on every person that made it to the phone call stage, every single one of them, because I wrote an ad as if I was casting for a rom-com and I was the casting director. That's just what I chose to do with it. I believe in having a lot of fun with everything you do, including this. And so I would say, when it came time for a call, I would say, my off-screen name is Duana Welch, and here's my phone number. I would appreciate your full name and your number so that when you call, you don't get set, or if you choose to call, you don't get sent to the outer reaches of voicemail, because my cell carrier, if you're not in my phone, my cell carrier won't. It won't put you through to me. That's just how my carrier does it. When you search, you're likely to find a lot of information. One thing you'll find out is, are they who they say they are? Does that name match, for example, their pictures on social media? Are their pictures recent? Are they presenting themselves the way they really present themselves in public? What can you find on LinkedIn about whether they really have the job or the profession or the education that they claimed to have? Stuff like that. And what you're basically asking yourself is this person legit? You might find some things in public records search if you can get access to the public records where you live. And those things, unfortunately, they can be a little bit difficult to search on your own. But you might be able to get public records online that show things like a history of DUIs, or a history of violent crime, or a history of crime against animals or children or women. And it takes a lot of sleuthing to get that information unless you use a background check site. If you use a background check site, I want to tell you there are some pitfalls. I have personally found with my clients and with me that it's more helpful to use a background check site as a tertiary who to trust. In other words, not first, not second. It's something that you supplement. You rely on your intuition, you rely on developed sources, other people, and then you rely on these background checks and your web search and your background checks. And here's why. Background check sites, they kind of kitchen sink this deal. They put everything in there. Like, one of the guys that I really liked, there's someone out there who has a very similar name, who's a small-time criminal. It's not the same person, but there's a lot of the same information. But you can tell it's not the same person if you really look. if you're not really looking carefully, the information may not be valid. So let me tell you how to find a good background check site. Go to, and I don't think any of them are perfect, not a single one, but whatever site you choose, go to the site and put and do a search on yourself. Buy an unlimited 30-day membership. Do a search on yourself and several people you know well enough to know whether the information on the background check is correct. Start there. And if there's information that shows that you did some shady stuff that you didn't do, or that really doesn't get it right about who your relatives are or any of that, if it's wrong about you and the people you know, it's probably wrong about this other person, in which case you contact the company that you bought the 30-day deal with and you say, I want my money back. I just did a search on myself and several people well known to me, and the information on your site is inaccurate, and they're going to give you your money back. Okay. What about the person's growth from the time they left their ex to the point of meeting you? Abusive or not, humans can redeem themselves. Yeah, absolutely, they can. But you know what? I'm trying to teach you how not to be with an abuser, and how not to be with an abuser is don't count on that. I'm just going to put it right out there. In the only in every study that I've read, the sum total of people who stopped abusing their partner was 7% stopped physically abusing their partner, and none of them ever in any study I've found stopped emotionally abusing their partner or the kids. So I'm not going to go with those odds. Nope. Yes, personal growth can happen, but I got to tell you, people, keep your nose clean and take good care of people, because in the internet age, in the age where people can find your ex even if you don't want them to, the truth's going to out. So be kind to people. Um, Sorry, could you repeat that last statistic? Yes, I can. The stat is that across all the studies I've looked at, only 7% of abusers ever stopped abusing their partner physically. Um, None stopped abusing them emotionally. Eventually, the physical abuse was a stand-in for the emotional abuse was a stand-in for the physical abuse. The abuser learned, oh, I can just say horrible things and that will have the same impact. So I really don't have to get up off the couch and smack people around anymore. And one person says people don't change. They usually don't change that much. That's for sure what the science is showing. They don't change that much. Don't trust it. Just don't. My job is not to give the abuser the benefit of the doubt here. My job is to protect everyone at this webinar. And how you do that is by not giving the benefit of the doubt, just period. Full stop. Okay. What if there's no trail? What if you can't find this person at all on the internet? I'm just going to be clear with you. I would never date that person. I would never date somebody who's completely untraceable on the internet. If they're not traceable, there's a reason. And the reason usually isn't a good one. A lot of times, the sociopath is the person who's motivated enough to go to every single background check site and click on this data is wrong, because you can do that. You can say this is incorrect, this is incorrect, this is incorrect. And the background check sites, they're worried about being sued, so they'll change stuff. Who knows to do that? A sociopath. And now you, but you know what? You don't have anything to worry about, right? So if there's no trail, and look for little tiny lies too. Sociopaths tend to lie about really small stuff. For example, the person who recently posted on their profile that they were 62, but then told 52, but then told me 62. I know what it takes to get your age up there. It's that wasn't an accident. The answer is no. Be safe. Look, there's plenty of fish in the sea. You do not have to accept this behavior, and you shouldn't. Okay, you can trust their behavior, kindness, and respect. Do not go for not quite abusive. Go for a proactively healthy relationship. And we've already talked about that. Uh, what if you have a very limited online profile due to your occupation? Then I would recommend that you get Facebook and Twitter right now, and you start saying things that are socially acceptable, so there's a trail on who you really are in terms of your personality. What if they just want privacy and don't want their information readily available on the net? Sorry, people who are taking my advice are not going to date them. There needs to be some way that people can tell who you are and that you are who you say you are. There needs to be a way to do that. If there's not, in this day and age, you're going to hear crickets. Okay, because Now, not everybody knows what I'm talking about. Not everybody reads my book or attends my seminars or this webinar. So, some people will be okay about it, but I talk to a lot of people who say, you know what, if I can't find them right now in 2021, not ever seeing them. Okay, so the fourth thing you can trust, pre-abuse indicators. Some of these are deal killers all on their own, others are deal killers in combination. And what I want you to understand is more pains, previous indicators means greater risk to you. So I'm not going to have a lot of time to go over these because we've only got a little under half an hour left in this presentation, and there are 25 pre-abuse indicators. And then I need to talk about the kinds of abusers and how to get out of abuse if you're already in it, or how to help your friends. So I'm going to go through these really, really, really quickly. Keep in mind that ACC is going to make this available to you. So if you don't find you have time to screenshot these, or if you find that you don't have time to take the notes you might want to take, they're going to keep this presentation live at ACC and you'll be able to refer back to it. Okay, the first is your vulnerability. I've tried to group previous indicators by category, and the first two have to do with you. We've already talked about your intuition. I want you to know if your intuition says this person is dangerous, end it, full stop, you're done. So the second thing about you is your vulnerability. Abusers look for the vulnerable. They view the vulnerable as a trove of opportunity to abuse. They look for poverty. They look for disability. They look for whether you've ever been abused. They think of you as a very easy mark if you or even if one of your parents was badly abused or your siblings. They look for that. Yeah, if you're a caregiver, you have a dying parent, if you have toddlers, oh, then they're not just looking at you, they're looking at the kids. If there's a large age gap, let me help you with this large age gap concept. A large age gap in high school is anything above 1.5 to 2 years. A large age gap in college is anything above 2 to 4 years. A large age gap in once you're about 27 is maybe 15 years. And after that, it really doesn't matter for quite a long time. But you need to look at how long have you been an adult? Not are you technically an adult? How long have you been one? The longer you've been one, and the closer in age this person is to you, the lower your odds for abuse. So somebody says, doesn't having your information on the net increase your risk because it makes it easier for people to take advantage of you because they know things about you they shouldn't and exploit your vulnerabilities? So don't post those things. That's my answer. I have a Facebook that's personal. I have 2 Facebook accounts that are professional. I have a Twitter that is professional, and I have an Insta that's professional. And there's nothing on any of these that should. I also have about 40 hours of podcasts and presentations, maybe 50 at this point. And I've got 2 books out on me, and I'm not worried about it. Really, you can let that go. Seriously. Block people if you need to. Okay, they look for, so you're saying this is a conscious approach? Yes, I'm saying it's a conscious approach. What do you mean by professional? Um, I don't know. I don't understand the question. I don't know what that refers to. Sorry. So what I'm saying is many abusers consciously, some of them unconsciously, to some of them, they just are looking for someone who can identify with their own pain of having been abused as children, because a lot of abusers were abused as children. So they feel this instant bond with you. And so they're not necessarily consciously looking for it, but they're going to play out an old script where you're the abused and they're the abuser. A lot of times, though, it is conscious. With sociopaths, they're looking for people to exploit. Okay, I've got, so professional can mean a more business type of account. Oh, yeah. So, my accounts, what do you mean? Yes, I have 2 Facebook pages and a Twitter page and an Insta that are just about my job. And then I have a personal Facebook page where I'm more myself. But I'm pretty vulnerable in stuff like this presentation. I'm telling you stuff about myself right now. And I know how to use the block button, and I know how to block on my phone, and I know how to get a restraining order if I need to. Like, there's just no need for worrying that other people have the time and inclination to, I mean, cyber stalking is a thing, but you can you can stop it. And frankly, not having an online presence is not going to stop people who want to stalk you. Let's see. In the interest of time, I'm looking at a message from Dr. Kosarpour. Okay. All right. So their jealous behavior. We've talked about jealousy is the number one reason that women get killed and maimed and severely abused all over the world. Do not tolerate jealous behavior that has no root in reality. And in fact, don't tolerate jealous behavior that has a root in reality if it's behavior. It's one thing to say, I feel jealous. It's another thing to LoJack your car, make you show them on your phone where you've been every day, or isolate you from your friends and family. Those are pre-abuse indicators. Don't tolerate it. Say bye now before you get abused. Okay. Their disrespect about or to an ex. We've already talked about this a little bit. I want to emphasize that denigrating women as a group, and notice that I'm mostly talking about women, that's because so women sometimes get emotionally abusive. They try to control a partner through threats and emotion, and emotional abuse is real abuse. I want to emphasize that it's real. A lot of the concern with pre-abuse indicators is emotional, but it's also physical. So I don't want any of you to get abused. If you're dating a woman who's denigrating men as a group, or you're dating a woman who's denigrating women as a group, if you're in a same-sex relationship, don't go out with her. She's not going to be fun anyway. She's denigrating the group that you belong to. Don't be with that person. But there's an extra layer of actual danger to it if there is someone who's denigrating women as a group and you're a woman. There's a high odds. In fact, whether your partner is a woman or a man, if you're a woman and your partner is denigrating women as a group, there are high odds that there's going to be physical abuse here. If there's a belief in men as the head of household, men as the ultimate arbiter of all things authority, men as superior, men as entitled to everything good, and this is a whipping red flag waving in the air. Do not go for that. Or as Lindy Bancroft says, if they disrespect women as a group, how long do you think it's going to be before they figure out you're a woman? Their disrespect toward you. Abuse always begins with disrespect. We know from science that no relationship survives where there is an ongoing presence of unkindness or disrespect. In other words, disrespect all by itself is eventually going to kill this relationship. So unplug it before you get disrespected as much as you possibly can. If they're disrespecting you, if you don't know what disrespect looks like, my book will give you a lot of examples. Some people don't know. Disrespect is how they were raised. But look at how they apologize. Look, I'm not saying you have to be with a saint type person. I'm saying that non-abusers show disrespect extremely rarely, and they catch themselves and say, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have said that. That was really disrespectful. Abusers say, what's wrong with you? You're sensitive, or you're needy, or they put it back on you. They gaslight you and say, no, I didn't disrespect you. They tell you that you're wrong. It's very different experience. If they verbally abuse, so we're crossing out of disrespect now, crossing into verbal abuse. If they verbally abuse anyone at all, it is not only words. They're revealing who they are. In my Love Factory for Single Parents book, I have a whole section on what disrespect looks like. And I had asked on Facebook, what's the number one thing people wish looking back they had not tolerated in a former partner? And 100% of the answers map back onto unkindness and disrespect. And one person said, I wish I had understood that how they treat the other people in their lives is the worst way that they treat the other people in their lives is how they will eventually treat you. Amen. That's exactly what's going to happen. Somebody says, concrete examples are very helpful for me. Thank you. You're very welcome. Okay. The refusal to own their mistakes with you and in other areas of your life. Abused people own their mistakes. In fact, abused people own other people's mistakes. I had an abused woman approach me and say that it was her fault that her husband kept hitting her because she hit him back. He started it and she was trying to fend him off. He was bashing her head into a wall and she pushed him. And then he said she was the abuser. And she accepted fault for that. It wasn't even her fault. Abusers refuse to own their mistakes, usually with you and in other life areas. Just nothing's their fault. Okay. Yes, how they treat their mothers gives you sometimes an idea. Yes, how they treat their mothers and everybody else, but for sure their mom. They claim they were falsely accused of beating a former partner. Okay, I'm going to quote Neil Jacobson here, who is one of the gods of abuse research. He says, women, if you have ever been abused before and a man tells you he was the abused partner, run. He is lying. Lying. He didn't pull any punches there, did he? He's lying. Do not believe it. Do not believe it. If this person, especially if male, claims that they were falsely accused of beating a former partner, if they say that they were the abused partner, data says bullshit. That's what the data says. The data says only 1 in 10,000 episodes of abuse is ever reported to the police, and even fewer than that ever come to fruition in a court of law. If you see a report that shows that there was domestic violence charge brought against this person, you need to believe it. My job is not to help you give people the benefit of the doubt here. It is to save your bacon, and this is the way to bet. If they claim women overreport, exaggerate, or abuse as much as men, look, male victims identify with abusees. They don't expend a lot of energy trying to say, but what if he didn't abuse her? They don't do that. They understand that abuse is rampant, and they don't denigrate the abuse. They don't try to put women down as a group. Claiming that women overreport, exaggerate, or abuse as much as men is denigrating women as a group. See it for what it is. Wow, my ex constantly told me he was abused by his previous girlfriends. I'd be interested to know if your ex abused you. I'm not asking you to say it publicly, but, and you said yes. Yep, now you know, right? Now you know what that was. Okay. Literally same. What about all the accounts of false accusations of abuse and rape? Rape is falsely reported about 1% of the time. I'm going to go with the 99%. Same with abuse. I'm not going to side with the abuser. You can keep asking the question. I'm going to keep giving you the same answer. But it was a female. Yes, sometimes women are abusive. It occasionally happens. I'm not saying it doesn't. I'm saying I'm going with the preponderance of data, but I don't mean to denigrate male victims here. There are male victims. There are also lesbian victims. There are women victims who are victims from a woman. That does happen. If he has hit any prior female partner, no matter how he justifies it, or if she has hit any prior female partner, no matter how justified, women, when they hit a male partner, it's almost always self-defense. Almost always, not always, almost. If there's someone who has hit a female partner, no matter how they justified it, the larger, stronger person, which is usually the person who commits the abuse, that person had an option, and the option was leaving the room. I'm not going to defend them. They use drugs or alcohol with any negative results. Look, substances do not actually change people, they reveal them. Jacobson and Gottman also found that it was not the case that drunkenness caused men to abuse their female partners. They found that many people, and they studied primarily men, that many men got drunk as an excuse for a beating that they planned. They knew they were going to beat their partner and they wanted an excuse, and they got drunk to do it. Yeah, wow. Okay, so that's just, I'm sorry, complete bullshit. I'm just not pulling any punches here. Complete bullshit. If somebody says, oh, but I was drunk. Yeah, you know what? There are a lot of people who are really nice when they're drunk. If you're not one, you need to look at that. They subdue conflict with intimidation, bullying, or symbolic violence, such as damaging property. Raising a fist to you is an intimidating move. Bullying you verbally, using symbolic violence, such as tearing up pictures of you and an ex, or getting your Facebook password and then publicly shaming you, anything like that, a threat to shame you, all of it is a form of pre-abuse. And I would say now we're crossing the line into actual abuse. That's very interesting. Makes a lot of sense when I think back to my father. Okay, they're controlling with or without threats. The root of abuse, remember what abuse is. It's violence whether emotional or physical. It's violence with a purpose, and the purpose is to control you. So if they're controlling you, guess what? You don't need your life to be spent with that person, do you? Not even a few months of it, do you? Have faith. There are good people in the world. Find one. They use threats, such as embarrassing you to control anyone. We just covered that. They've used or they do use money to control you or a former partner. If, for example, they have the idea that they have all the bank account information, but you can't know how much money the two of you have. You can't have any access to any way yeah, wow, mind blown right now. Yeah. If they, you can only have a credit card that they can see what you're spending. If they have an alert on the credit card so that anytime you spend anything, they know exactly where and how. Again, now, let's say you were married for 20 years, you had an affair, and your partner needs total transparency so that you can rebuild trust. Fair enough. You may have a lot of these things. You might have to show them your phone every day for a whole year. You might need to have an alert on the credit card. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about somebody who's just doing this. There's no affair history. There's no real reason that they need this information. They're just doing it. If they have any criminal history, now, this criminal history of any type, you should be done. Because, again, my job in this seminar is not to help you give people the benefit of the doubt. It's to make sure you never get abused. And you know what? People with a criminal history are unlikely in their high odds of abusing you. This might involve crimes against women, children, or animals, but then again, it might not. I will tell you, if the crimes are against women, children, or animals, remember, 1 in 10,000 of these kinds of events is ever reported or prosecuted. A conviction is even less likely. So if you're seeing that, if you find that evidence, or I'm telling you what I've found in my dating life and my work with clients, a lot of guys are now wise to, and in lesbian relationships, abusive women have gotten wise to the fact that this shit is online. I'm sorry, I'm swearing, but really, I'm just have no patience for this stuff. I've helped too many people leave abusive relationships to have patience with it. I have patience with them while they're leaving. I don't have patience with abuse. And so I've experienced this phenomenon personally and professionally where the abuser will say, oh, you know, I've got a DUI, or, you know, my former partner called the cops on me for abuse once, or I was called into HR for sexually harassing a woman, or I was falsely accused of raping a woman. The reason they're telling you that, you know why they're telling you? Because they're trying to do CYA, cover your butt. They're trying to, they feel like if they get ahead of it and admit it, that somehow you're not going to see this for what it is, which is a red banner. Or we can get you fired for not reporting. It's a state law, even if hearsay. Yeah, in some professions, that's true. Okay. Okay, this one is really sensitive. If he was abused by as a child, especially a boy, if a boy was abused as a child, women who were abused as children or who witnessed their mothers get abused as children, women are very likely to be targeted for abuse. There is a gender difference here. Men are very likely, if they were abused as a child or witnessed their mothers being abused, they are much more likely to have to become abusers. So I'm not saying it's absolutely always the case that if a male was abused as a child, that he's going to be an abuser. I am going to say that in Jacobson and Gottman's study, over half of their everyone in their study was either an abuser or the partner of an abuser. Of the abusers, over half were men who had witnessed their mothers being abused and or had been physically abused themselves. Here's what you do. I'm not saying throw all these people on the trash heap. There are people who do, you know, there are people who abuse who were never abused, and are people who have been abused who never go on to abuse. What I would say is you need to extend the courtship. You need to trust your gut. You need to get secondary sources. You need to use Google. I would suggest getting a private investigator, really and truly. I'm not saying toss this person, throw them to the curb right away, but I am saying if they're so compelling, especially if you were abused, That's an old dynamic, and it really feels hooking. You feel like you're going to get it right this time. Odds are you're not. So well, I'm 76-year-old, married with a man that is an alcoholic control freak, the only one that controls the money. My mom will never leave him. She was going to leave him back in December, but she changed her mind and told me she'll stay with him. She feels sorry leaving him. I just don't get it. But I decided to leave her alone. I was really disappointed, but complicated. Any professional advice? Yes. And I'm going to help you with that in just a couple more minutes. People who think that other people generally suck, people who have low regard for life, people who have low regard for their own life, they say things that are suicidal, people who have a special relationship with weapons, meaning that they view weapons as being all about revenge, power, or control, people who collect guns. The more the guns, the more the odds. These people are likely to be abusers and sociopaths. Don't go there if you value your life. Do I work with men who've been abused in childhood? Occasionally, yes. Yep, occasionally I do. And I'd say about a third of my male clients. Mhm. Yeah. So I do know that there are plenty of men who don't go on to, who were abused, who don't go on to abuse anyone. But I also know if you want to be with one of these men and you were abused, first of all, if you were abused, I don't want you to be with one of those men. If you were abused, you need, it's like the movie The Highlander. There can only be one. In any relationship, there should not be two people who were abused. Okay. There can only be one. If you weren't abused and you're looking at a partner who was abused, you need to have a lengthy courtship during which time you hire a private investigator. You vet their secondary sources, such as mutual friends on social media, their other people that they know, and you trust your gut. You need to look at everything in that case. Okay. So if this person wants to court you really, really quickly, pushing for commitment or marriage or cohabitation extremely quickly, you need to look at that in combination with other things. A lot of abusers cannot maintain the facade of niceness for very long, so they will try to get you to marry them right away. Or they will try to get you to, you're welcome. Or they will try to get you to commit in some way, or they'll try to get you under their financial power. I was acquaintances with a woman who had been abused. She had gotten out of that relationship. She had worked really hard to establish herself as the manager of a big chain of stores. And she met this guy. He claimed that he loved her at first sight. Love at first sight is actually a thing, especially for men. Surprise, surprise. That didn't trouble me that he loved her at first sight. What troubled me was he loved her at first sight. He wanted to marry her 4 weeks after they met, and he wanted her to quit her job. That's social isolation. Nope, 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 nope. Especially since she was abused. Not a good pattern. He won't accept rejection. He won't take it, like he tries to cyber stalk you afterward or does cyber stalk you. Good thing you left. He won't take no for an answer with sex. The women in greatest danger of being murdered by their partners are the ones who early on noticed that their partner would not take no for an answer with sex. Treats you worse in private than public. Abusers are frequently charming. By the way, if you've ever met somebody who just felt really charming, I want you to feel like somebody's a really aw shucks, golly gee, nice kind of person, but I don't like it when somebody's charming. Charming is actually a sign that somebody may be a sociopath. They use the charm to blind people to what's really going on with them. Treating you worse in private, they're trying to put on a show for the public. It's a sociopath kind of thing. Loan sharking, okay? Trying to give you gifts that you didn't ask for at a point in the relationship where it doesn't make sense. Okay, so I had the most adorable date about a week ago where I had sent this guy a meme that said, to fascinate a woman, give her a piece of cheese. It was from a book of spells and incantations. And I just thought that was hilarious. We both did. Well, when he showed up to take me on a socially distanced walk, as one does during pandemic, he said, I want to fascinate you. And he held out a piece of cheese. That's adorable. That's not loan sharking. Loan sharking is someone, and I've seen this in my practice, saying, oh, you know what? I'm going to wind up buying you a new car. We just met. No, thank you, but no. Okay, 3 questions you might be asking yourself if you've already been abused. And I'm going to answer them per the science. Will the violence, these are the 3 questions that abused people most commonly ask. Will the violence stop on its own? No. Only 7% of abusers stop the physical violence, but 0% stop the emotional violence. And remember, people people routinely report that the emotional violence is the more painful part of the violence. Can you do anything to stop it? No, you're not being abused because it's your fault. You're being abused because it's the abuser's fault. You're not in control of it. That's about them. It's not even about you, but it's affecting you. So it's not going to stop. You can't do anything to stop it. What should you do? I bet all of you know the answer to this. What do you think the answer is? Yep, run, leave. Yep, exactly. Okay, so what are the obstacles to leaving? This is from Jacobson Gottman's research. The first obstacle is the dream. For the person who said that the mom still feels sorry for the drunkard controlling husband, and the mom is 76 and feels sorry for him, she's still stuck in the dream. This is the biggest obstacle to leaving. Women will not leave an abuser until they give up on the potential of their abuser. And I will say, though, that Jacobson and Gottman found that the rate of leaving in non-abusive marriages on an every 2-year basis is a 2% fail rate. The rate of leaving every 2 years when there's an abuser in the mix is 38%. So if you've ever heard, oh, women never leave their abuse, not true. They leave at a much higher rate, 19 times higher rate, right? They leave at a very high rate. So yeah, but my dog's coming to say hi. Hello, everybody. This is Coda. I know. He's telling me it's time to wrap up, so I will. The second obstacle is further violence. Let's say, okay, so somebody says, if there's a period of time between abusees that you think you're out of the woods, you will start finding yourself walking on eggshells, wondering when next. Yes, of course. Yep. What if they hold a child over you? Mine brainwashed my child against me. So sorry to hear that. This is the second obstacle we're talking about, further violence. I've worked with people who were trying to find it. They'd given up the dream. They knew that this person was horrible. They'd given up the dream of this person's basic goodness that's going to carry them through. And someday, the love that they sometimes show me, they will always show me. They'd given that up. But what they said to me was, this person killed my dog in front of me and said I was next if I left. Thank you. So the threat of further violence, that's a real thing. And look, there are two kinds of abusers. Jacobson and Gottman came up with the names for them: pit bulls and cobras. Pit bulls are the ones that sink their teeth in. They are bottomless wells of insecurity and pathological jealousy. They're obsessed with you. When you try to leave them, they might seem okay with it, but actually they're the ones who kind of help you pack your bags, and then they're potentially lethal for up to 2 whole years after you leave. We're going to talk about how to leave, but if your gut is telling you this person is dangerous and might be dangerous for 2 whole years, you're not wrong. Cobras are the other kind. And cobras are called that by Jacobson and Gottman because they don't sink their teeth in, they strike. These are the sociopaths. These are the people who abused animals and women and children in the past, and you can find a criminal record and that kind of thing. Okay. Excuse me, this is abusive convenience. They just abuse pit bulls. It almost feels like a compliment. I mean, they're abusing you. They think they love you. And they'll say, I only hit you because I love you. Cobras, they don't care. They're just going to abuse whoever's around them at the moment. As soon as you're not the person who's around them, they give up on you and they abuse somebody else, whoever's next. So they might try to kill you when you leave, but then they usually just let you go after that. And you, as the abused person, have to think about which kind of person you're dealing with. So cobras actually, heart rates usually escalate when people are angry. Cobras actually get calmer right before they beat somebody. They're enjoying it and they're thinking about it. Okay, so how do you get out? You need intuition. Notice that's the theme today, intuition. You need timing and you need a plan. Folks, if you want to help somebody leave an abuser, I want you to have respect for the abusee. The abusee is the only person who's going to know when it's time. Can you help somebody understand that it's time to give up the dream? Yes, but can you tell them it's time to actually leave? I know the temptation. When I was younger and I didn't know this data yet, I tried to get somebody to leave and she didn't leave, and I wound up losing her friendship, and I will always feel sorrowful for my role in that, because I removed through my pressure a source of safety and love for her. The abusee knows when it's time. The expert on the abuser is the abusee. Women who successfully leave, abusees who successfully leave a dangerous and controlling person, they use their intuition and their deep knowledge of the abuser to make a plan, and they almost never plan by themselves. People who leave safely plan with others. You can use an abuse specialist at a shelter. You can use the National Domestic Violence Hotline, which is, the phone number is 800-799-SAFE. Or if you want to text, you can text connect to 741-741. You can erase your entire history. Make sure if you're going to do anything by text that you don't have your phone set up to automatically download to a computer. Make sure that you have, if you have Apple products especially, that they don't automatically download. Make sure, and I would advise you to get enough money saved on your own that you can get a burner phone. You can get some really cheap phone and a really cheap plan, and use that phone for all your domestic violence and safety planning needs. Okay, so what could you do in order to help someone who's abused? This is what you can do. You can listen to them. You can help them with this information, help them find the person who can plan with them. They need a specialist to help them make this plan. Abused people know the abuser. Abused people are smart. Abused people are capable. Abused people have intuition. They, once they give up the dream, they have what they need. What they need now is your soft shoulder and somebody else's expert help with making a safe plan. That's what they need. Okay, I have gone a little bit over time, but I hope that it was worth it. I really hope that the presentation has helped you to help yourself and help other people. I never, ever, ever want to see any of you, your children or your loved ones get abused. If you insist on kindness and respectfulness from the very, very beginning, and if you end relationships the moment they cross out of that territory, you won't be abused. Stop making excuses for people who don't treat you the way you deserve to be treated. Get the love you deserve, even if you didn't get it before.
Thank you very much. The time with you, Duana, always goes so fast, and we always wish we had more time. But I think I can speak for everybody, judging from the comments, that it's been very enlightening and very useful, practical, thought-provoking, and very useful. And thank you, everybody, for spending this time with us. As Duana mentioned, and Leila too, a recording of this session will be available on our website. And if you, on the ACC website, if you, or anywhere, just put in austincc.edu/peace, you can find your way to previous recordings of our webinars, and this one will go up in a few days.
And Dr. Khosrowpour, if I may, someone has asked for the reference page. So I've got a contact me page listed right now. You can see it now. You can reach out to me by email, and I'll keep it confidential, at duana@lovesciencemedia.com. You can read my blog postings on this topic, and you can see on the right-hand side of my blog page, you can see there's something that says references or Love Science reading. Go to my reading page and it'll list all the different resources that I use. So that's at lovesciencemedia.com. And if you want a direct link to everything that I've written in terms of books, you can go to lovefactually.co. You can also find lots of free content on Amazon, Goodreads, Psychology Today, Spotify, and more.
Thank you. Have a great day, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Thank you again so much.
My pleasure.